Well, let's go beyond our borders, but on matters that are very key to the country here. And the first week of COP29 is coming to an end, and there is very little progress in the talks. And in fact, Africa says it worries that the continent may walk away with nothing. Last night, a draft agreement on climate finance, a key agenda for Africa, was published, but according to the negotiators, its contents are upsetting. We now join NMG's sustainability editor Zainab Wandati, who is attending the COP in Baku, Azerbaijan, for the latest. Zainab, good afternoon. It is afternoon here. What is in this draft agreement that makes it so contentious?
Hello, Ibrahim. It is also afternoon here in Baku. I'm only 1 hour ahead of you. And yes, the draft text did drop last night, and Africa and the least developing countries and all the countries in the global south are pretty upset about it, because when Africa came here, when the LDC group came here, when the global south came here, their agenda was key, and they're all speaking in one voice that they want money. And this money they want, they are calling it the new quantified collective goal. So this money is intended to give these developing countries the chance that they need, or the power that they need to adapt to or mitigate the impacts of climate change. And Africa is asking for $1.3 trillion. But when the text dropped last night, it did not have that target that Africa is looking for, and it did not have any timelines for when this money will come, and Africa is looking for timelines. And in fact, the text, using the COP language, is called bracketed, so the text is heavily bracketed. What that means is that all the words within those brackets are heavily contested. They're words that nobody has agreed to. And why this is a bad thing for Africa is because this is the last day of the technical negotiations, which means that from tomorrow and Monday they need to be handing over a clean text to the ministers. And if this text is still heavily contested like this, if it is still heavily bracketed like this, it means that there's not much the ministers can do. They can't add anything to it. All they can do is to discuss what is within those brackets. And it is hoped that by the end of the day today, a new text will be out, which will have resolved some of these issues. So African group, the LDC group, the least developing countries group, the countries in the global south are still giving their reactions to this text. Last week, when an initial draft was out, it was about 8 pages. Then earlier this week, it went up to 34 pages. And when the draft came out last night, it came out less 8 pages. So there's still a lot of discussion on what this means for the continent. And I did get to speak to Kenya's principal secretary in the Ministry of Environment, who is currently leading the Kenya delegation in the absence of CS Adam Duale, who had to leave for urgent matters. And he expressed Kenya's and Africa's concern against what this text looks like. And this is what he had to say.
We are still pushing on as a team of negotiators from Kenya, and of course within the African group of negotiators chaired by our climate envoy Ali. But as indicated earlier on in the week, the African group of negotiators have always put in a strong position on what we need in terms of the financing for the global south and for Africa. And the $1.3 trillion still stands from our end. But we want to, there's a concern as we finish week one that we don't want just to be a mere agreement, but we want tangible conversations with our brothers and sisters, especially from the global north, on how this is going to be financed. So we have a concern in terms of how this is progressing. We don't want mere text, mere agreements. We want a factual and an understanding on how this is going to happen. So as we go into week 2, and we expect that our ministers will be able to take that on board, and we are going to brief them as soon as they resume the high level on week 2 of our concerns from the African group of negotiators.
So Ibrahim, today is day 6 of these talks, and tomorrow, day 7, this site will be closed. It's a rest day. Delegates have been given 1 day to rest. And so it's very likely that tonight the negotiators will be burning the midnight oil to finish or iron out everything that needs to be ironed out, because from tomorrow the negotiators hand over these conversations from Monday, that is, they hand over this conversation to ministers who now bring in the political will that is needed to carry these discussions home and bring it home. And so tomorrow the African group will be holding a ministerial for the African ministers, the AMSEN, they call it the African Environment Ministers Council. So they'll be meeting tomorrow for a debrief from the negotiators what's happened so far this week, what's left in contention, where do they need to pick up, so that Monday, now the ministers carry this conversation forward. But I'll be telling you more about this in subsequent bulletins, Ibrahim.
Well, Zainab, before I let you go, even as we speak about the new collective quantified goal, there was that push by the developed countries to have emerging economies like China also contribute to climate financing. Is this still in contestation, and is it something captured in the draft that you're speaking about?
So this collective, the NCQG as they're calling it here, has come up as a result of a conversation that started in 2009 when the developed world, particularly Hillary Clinton, committed to give the developing world $100 billion per year as climate financing. But research has shown that this money is nowhere near enough for what the countries need for adaptation and mitigation. And so the discussions about the NCQG came up to be able to raise this goal beyond the 100 billion and bring it to 1.3 trillion. However, if you look at the actual amount of money that they need for sub-Saharan Africa, it's about 45 trillion. So the 1.5 trillion ceiling is just a start, to get the conversation started. And China itself, as you mentioned, China is part of the G77 and China group. The G77 is basically means group of 77, and Kenya is part of that group, China is part of that group. There are all those discussions going on that China should actually contribute money because it is the biggest emitter. But it's still too early to tell. We wait to see what the decision will be by the end of this day today, Ibrahim.
Well, Zainab Wandati there, she is the Nation Media Group Sustainability Editor, coming to us live from Baku in Azerbaijan, following up on the developments at COP29. Remember, very important conversations going on there, miles away, but very critical to Kenya and Africa.